The secret to longevity is
Always
always staying in the beginner's
that-
mind. But what
yeah.
if there was no box? Bali is teaching me to be. I've never been wetter in my life.
So you're on the highway tomorrow with Deb Parrish and Bert Cruz. And I want to do a two-part maybe with you. One where we talk about your experience in Bali. But I think first it'd be interesting to sort of find out who you are for our small listening audience. Why don't you give me a quick synopsis of your life, your career, your work, particularly to where it is now, to what your focus is for your work now that you want to do. Not a, I don't need to hear every little job you've ever had.
Yeah. Oh, man. Come
Yeah, I
on.
know, right?
Well, I mean, I guess I would call it a little bit of meandering. I mean, my entry point really was in accounting. And I would say I chose accounting just because I needed to make money and live. Even though I think I was more creative. But then as I got into accounting, I realized a good portion of that is interpretation of the numbers and the accounting, because it's one thing to put numbers on paper, but then to explain to business leaders of all different kinds, whether they be CEOs or CMOs or COOs. A lot of times they're like, wait, what does all this mean? And so I found that I was interpreting and graphically interpreting. So I got to use a lot of my creative skills to make pictures to show, okay, this is what has happened. And then I became really, I'll tell you what happened when this turned was when I started working for THX, Lucasfilm, which I think back then most particularly, Lucasfilm was known for kind of their blue ribbon everything, right? And one of the things that they had stellar people in was their strategy place, their strategy department. I mean, we had a great leader in the strategy world, and she helped us hone our skills, not just in strategy, but in forecasting, which started to take off in my mind because I realized, yes, it's important to look back, but how do you use all of that information to go forward?
Okay.
And so my career took a huge turn toward talking about the future and how do you respond to the things that are coming at you.
Okay. And what like timeline? What are we talking about?
Well, let's see. I was working for THX back at the end of the 90s and into the early 2000s.
Okay.
And then I got back, I went into organic food.
Okay.
Just because I'm a foodie. And Northern California is like,
Right.
a haven for that.
Right.
Mostly particularly in the entrepreneurial world,
And
right?
the farm to table movement.
Oh, yeah,
pretty
big
much
time.
started there.
Yeah, and so, that was super fun because I worked with a lot of visionaries who created not just products and services, but ideas and visions and movements, which were so fun to work with these people that were like, wait, I see, for example, I see GMO potentially being a problem. What do we do about that? Let's do something. Let's create, something now to kind of address what could possibly be coming. So that was just an example. But then I kind of went past forecasting into what I now call foresight. And I see that as more of a higher dimension of thinking. So what I started doing was working with entrepreneurs and business owners and business leaders to get them out of the 3D thinking world, which is, material, like, oh, okay, this number means this. Well, does it? Is that really what that number means? What could it mean? And to get up above the problem and to start looking at the problem more 360, because every situation has multiple causes and potentials.
Okay. Can you give me a more concrete example so that I kind of understand it a little better?
Well, let's see. Okay, so I'm trying to think of something, really easy and simple. Well, the last company I worked for was a water treatment company.
Okay.
And we were involved in the water situation in California, which
Okay.
is still brewing. We've certainly heard a lot about it
Right.
lately with regard to fires, but with the agricultural world, there is a dependency on the old technologies. Like, we need water, so bring it to us from some other place.
Okay.
And so what we did was we went, but wait a minute, let's look at water as finite. What if, this isn't true, but what if every human was allocated X number of gallons for your year? And you knew that a certain amount of those gallons were going to evaporate and go away. You would never see them again or get soaked into the ground. But the point would be you would want to capture and preserve as much of your water as possible.
Okay.
And you would want to control your water, the quality of your water, the location of your water, etc. So we designed and built modular water treatment systems that could be deployed to not just farms, but to places like that had an earthquake. You know, our treatment systems could be packed into small compartments. They folded up. So we didn't. So again,
Interesting.
Going
Wow.
traditional,
That's
right? So
amazing.
going traditional.
Yeah.
Example, right over there is a hard. Right there.
Right.
It's a hard tank.
Hard tank.
Try
water
to
tank.
ship that.
Yeah.
Expensive.
For sure.
So what we did was we used, sorry. Oh, I can't think of the word right now. We used membranes.
Okay.
So
Oh.
what you do is you build a
The collapsible
modular,
membrane, sure.
yeah, and that you build a modular water container that folds up, and then there's a membrane inside of it.
Okay.
And so, I mean, that was kind of the gist of it. Now, there was all kinds of other ways to put the water in and to filter it. One idea was, hey, we got a plastic problem. All we need is the materials in there to help to filter the water. What if we used plastic bottles? And that became our medium to filter the water.
Interesting.
So those were some of the concepts, and I'm saying that
Okay.
that's that 360 degree where you go, well, we got a problem with shipping; it's expensive. Well, how do we deal with that? We have a plastic problem. How do we use that? And what's the need? The need is over here. We don't have enough water, and by the way, we're fighting all the time. Well, what if you didn't have to fight anymore? What if you really knew, I have this much water, and this is what I do with it, and I know that the quality of it is, to this level.
Okay.
And to be honest, one huge, I guess, elegant, if you will, kind of inspiration was the Tamales water system. That became a model.
Yeah.
And funny, the company that actually bought the company that I made actually is the company that took over the services.
I think I've told you a little bit about the water project I work with here, down in a city just south of Ubud. Small enclaves have fresh water at the tap that you can drink, and usually it's 4 or 5 expats who've started a community water service for themselves. But Balinese villages do not. They have water at the tap. It's just not drinkable, And so there was one village that had done it the first time, but they hadn't figured out how to maintain it, so it got contaminated. So this village, Batuan, in south of Ubud, was putting in literally the first water system that would bring drinkable water to the tap. And I just happened upon it in a way because the guy who headed the project was a guy who had hired to help me learn some Indonesian. And I ended up going down there a lot and spending time and videotaping and shooting drones and providing social media for them, which turned out to be invaluable because in a situation like I don't think we think about this in America because we're just so inundated with social media. But here, something like that has a huge impact.
Yeah.
It's like the governor sees it. The governor sends a link to the president. The president sees it, and it sort of says, "Oh, this community is, doing a really fantastic." And at the time, I was just trying to I just wanted to hang out. Yeah, I just wanted to hang out with them. And so I was just doing this on the side, not really thinking about the importance of how I was contributing to the project. And it was fortuitous that it was in the middle of COVID, because Wyon was able to get volunteers, which he would not have been able to get. And so now they've got this amazing freshwater spring on one side of the river. It comes across on a pipe that's suspended over the river and then climbs a hill to a water tank. Maybe I'll drive you by. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I
They
love it.
painted it. I mean, one of the things we're talking about now is putting an Airbnb on that property so that that money will be used to maintain the project,
Nice.
maintain the maintenance of the project. And it started off with about just a few families, I think 35 initially, now it's like 150, but then across the highway essentially is the major part of the city of Batuan, and that's going to service 5,000 families. And so that's like phase two of the project. But it was like, they get money from Jakarta, from the federal government, from the local, state government, from the province, and then they had to raise money locally. They had to, match, I won't say match funds, but they had to raise a specific amount from their local community. And it's a really, it's just amazing to see it all come together.
Yeah.
And you learn so much during the course of these projects. And the spring that they're tapped into has an output that's like unheard of, so they'll probably never run out of water. Moving along with you though, what's your future?
As I foresee my,
Yeah.
I'm not, to be honest, I'm not sure.
Okay.
And I think that, that kind of brings us back to why I came to Bali. What happened last year for me was kind of this cataclysmic, a bunch of things happened all at once. We sold that company,
Right.
as I told you, and it wasn't like we sold it to make money. We literally sold it to pay off our debts because we had borrowed a lot of money to make this happen. And
Okay.
it just, confluence of stuff made it not workable, just personal with regard to the founder, etc. And I had been doing some work also with another organic food company that sold, and I just got really discouraged. I got discouraged with the way business is done because it doesn't have foresight. What I learned last year was that people don't do anything long term anymore. It's all for short term.
It's all for short-term gain.
I got really discouraged.
Yeah.
And so what I started doing kind of here and there since then has been working with people who are trying to get going on something and helping them create, not vision, because they have the vision, but to understand how to use possibility. And this is what I call my multidimensional thinking model. And it's literally getting people out of their heads.
Okay.
And it's not meditation.
Right.
It's stepping outside yourself and looking at all that is out there, all the potentials, and opening your mind.
Okay, but how do you? Okay, so for me, one of my pet peeves is people who refer to themselves as artists, and it'll be like, I'm an orthopedic surgeon and what I do is art. Or, I have this spreadsheet that I've done for my company. It's incredibly creative what I've done. I think outside the box. So you hear these phrases, I think outside the box. And it's yet, I think when you're a historically creative person, you look at that and go, you're not really thinking outside. You're not that far outside the box,
Right. Well, but I also think that there is something people try to do, and this has been a challenge for me because I don't like doing this, but there's something that people try to do, and they try to productize their thinking models, right? They go, oh, I've done this for myself. I'm going to go help other people do that, but I've got to create this structured product in order to give it to them or sell to them or enroll them in my program or whatever. And I have really struggled with that because I'm like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do that, because that's not what this is.
Right.
For me, each and every person is different.
Mm-hmm.
And what we do is we go to the problem and we just beat the shit out of it.
Mm-hmm.
We beat that problem up.
Mm.
And then we start to think, well, what else could happen? Because
Mm-hmm.
when we're in a problem, we really don't see outside the problem. And
Right.
this is this box thing you're
Right,
talking
right,
about.
right.
And people who think outside the box, okay, they do.
Uh-huh.
But again, it's the jargon that I think
Right.
we get stuck in.
For sure. Yeah, definitely.
And it's really a journey. It's a thing that happens to me very organically, and it very much is a person by person thing. Like, for example, I was working with a lawyer who hated being a lawyer. Literally
Wow.
hated being a lawyer.
Wow.
But didn't know how else to be in the world. And I joked with you the other night about the Saturn return, but
Right.
it's a real thing. When you're in your
Right.
mid 50s and you know it's not time for me to quit yet.
Right.
What do I do now? I've
Right.
spent 20 years being this,
Yeah.
and now I'm gonna do something else. Well, in a way, that's not something you can help people understand.
Yeah.
They have to get there themselves. And so I don't tell them anything. I have them talk to themselves. Like, let's have a conversation with yourself. What else could it be? And an exploration. And I found one of my favorite ways to be, and and this will go on when we talk about Bali, but Bert, I came to Bali, and that's what came to me. Something showed up, and it was the word curiosity. It was the word curiosity. And I'm even getting kind of choked up, because that
Yes.
was the gift of Bali to
Yeah.
me, was it said, oh, no, Deb, you don't have to go out and create this program and go sell it and market it. Just stay curious. And people will come to you.
I think
who want to be curious too.
Yeah, I know that, like, in my own family, I'm considered one of, they all kind of say, oh, Bert's the smart one in the family. And it's like, I don't feel that. I feel my intelligence is really knowing that I don't know so much, and that I'm still curious about learning.
Yeah.
But it's like, I try not to judge things or have opinions on a lot of things that I really don't know anything about. I'm like, wait a minute, I don't have to.
You don't have to.
You don't have to.
Because you know what? They'll
Yeah.
tell you.
They'll tell you, yeah. And
Not only that, but to me, those are the most fun conversations.
yes, I agree.
I'm like, please tell me more.
Yeah.
I want to know. I want to understand how you got there.
The logic behind
Yeah.
others
Tell
thinking
me.
that gets them to whether they vote for Trump or they vote for Joe Biden. It's like,
Yeah.
how did you
How
get
did
there?
you
Because
get
I know
there?
you're a reasonable human being,
Yeah.
So how do you get there?
I can't remember the name, but there's a Japanese term for this. I think it's Seizan, is it? Where it's beginner's mind, where if you stay in beginner's mind, and they believe this, that the secret to longevity is always staying in the beginner's
that
mind,
beginner's
because
mind.
it's the shutting down, and you've seen this too
Yes.
with people where they go,
yeah.
I don't like that. Well, do you?
Yeah.
Have you tried it? Or have
you
you
tried
tried
it?
it like this?
Right.
I find that to be the most inspiring part of my work, and
Okay.
and my trip to Bali crystallized it for
Okay.
me. It just brought it into me. I went, oh my God, that's what I need. That is the state of mind. That, in fact, I was actually saying this to somebody. They said, well, when you come back from Bali, what are you going to bring back? And I said, I'm going to bring back intense curiosity.
Yeah, I hope so.
Intense curiosity, where I don't know anything. What I thought I knew, I don't know anymore. And guess what? Tomorrow it's going to be
Yeah.
the same thing. And then the next day and the next day. And when you have little people in your life, like I have a grandson who's going to be 5. Oh my gosh, every time I'm with him, it's a new human. Who are you now?
Yeah, I know my first trip here, I kept a journal, I've told you, and gave it to all my friends. It apparently inspired a lot of people to come here. And I was very descriptive in the ritual and what we were seeing. And I think a lot of them came and had a very similar experience. And I would love for you to go back and translate that to people so that when they come, they're not just coming here for a cheap vacation at the beach, but they're coming to immerse themselves like you've done in the life and the culture here, which I think is so rewarding an experience. Talk about getting outside your box. You know, it's like,
I want to share something with you that I heard. So I went to a ceremony, and it was a blessing ceremony here at the local temple, and it was beautiful. And everybody in the village had come, and everybody dresses up in their best, and they bring all these lovely, offerings, gorgeous, beautiful offerings.
Right.
And the children are also dressed.
Yes.
And I watched the children, and the children played.
Yeah.
The whole time.
Yeah.
They ran, they explored, and they were never told no.
Oh, God.
They were never told no.
Yeah.
And I watched this, and I had to ask my host, I was like, tell me about this thing. He says, well, in our world, children can be naughty. Mm-hmm. We want them to be naughty. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, naughty to us is a different word.
Yeah.
In his word of naughty for us is inquisitive or spontaneous and it goes back to what we were talking about. And I'm sorry, I never remember the word, but the one about the monsters the night before.
Right.
That, oh my God, I'm getting chills. That is the essence of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
They want their kids to be naughty.
Yeah.
And I said, well, they don't stay naughty, right? And he goes, no, right about, 15, they don't get to be naughty anymore. Now they're an adult. And I'm like, so what happens? And he said, well, they have different expectations. Now they have to be part of society and contribute. Right. And if you watch these kids with each other. Mm-hmm. And I'm just so touched by this.
Oh, the way they play together.
They don't fight. I have never seen more children caring for children, and not in a way that's caretaking. It's a play that is very gentle and soft. Okay, here's an example. Go back to that ceremony. There was a little guy. I bet he couldn't have been 3. Mm-hmm. And the bigger little boys were probably maybe 5, 6, 7, and they were playing a game of chase.
Okay.
And this little guy was it. And they were very smart. They knew exactly how to get away from this little guy.
Sure.
And they would surround him and taunt him, but it wasn't a bad thing. They were like, come on, get me, come on. There was a game. Well, he figured out, this little 3-year-old, he's like, oh wait, there's adults over there aren't moving. I'm gonna go get them and make them it. So he came and he pushed me, like, you're it.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't know what they were playing. I was actually turned around, and it startled me. And all of my hosts around me kind of went to protect me, and I went, no, he's playing a game. So I went, and I acted like I was it.
Okay.
And I kind of went after him, and the look of pure joy and elation on that little boy's face, like he was like, oh my gosh, that adult is now part of the game. And I got him back really fast, and he was it again. but it was just the fact that it was the game was not, it wasn't, how do I say this? We have a culture in America that I'm sad for. We teach our children to be bullies to each other.
Right.
And we wonder why bullying happens. It's because they're taught to be bullies. They're taught to be bullies, but they're not naturally bullies. They really are natural, loving creatures. And when they're allowed to be themselves, and they're allowed to stay in whatever potential and possibility they can, then they create these monsters and these parades.
Yeah. In these parades, I know, it's amazing.
And they're allowed to be curious. They're allowed to explore. And I think that's where I learned.
They're also, I don't mean to interrupt, but it's just, in a family compound like where I live and where you're living, you almost never see a young child, a baby, in the first year of its life alone. In fact, I believe they're not allowed to have their feet touch the ground.
No,
for
they're
6
always being
months.
carried, yeah.
And I know that, in my compound, somebody had a baby about a year ago. It's always in somebody's arms. And I'm thinking, in the U.S., we'd be like, oh, no, I can't let you touch my child because you may have disease on your hands or something. And so you have parents, maybe grandparents, who are allowed to fondle and touch and hold the child. But over here, the kid, the first year or so of their life, I mean, it's just, to me, it's like there's no fear. that kid could not, if it cries, it's probably because it, pooped its pants or something. But it's like there's no.
Or they're hungry. And
Or they're
I'm going to tell
hungry.
you, in that compound with that baby,
Yeah.
I told you this already. I never heard that baby cry.
It's amazing.
I did not hear the baby cry.
Yeah.
And if it did, there was a toddler and she was just mad.
Uh-huh.
And I heard her.
Right,
But,
yeah.
but the little baby,
Right.
the little one, I've never heard him cry.
Right.
And
No.
and this goes back to that curiosity where
Uh-huh.
you're allowing curiosity, and
Right.
I think that's why we get stuck
Yeah.
in these boxes, because nobody ever taught you how to be curious.
Yeah.
You weren't allowed to be curious. You have to stand in line. You have to, read this thing. No, you can't speak like this. And I have my own stories about that. Like I had to work through, my own issues with my teaching methods, because they were very rigid, and no, you don't do this and you don't do that, and this is how you chew, and this is the size of the bite you take, and I knew, here's what I always knew. I was always being watched. Somebody was always watching me
Okay.
to make sure that I didn't misbehave or step out of line or do
Okay.
it wrong.
Wow.
And that is my experience of my childhood. And these kids, I was stunned the
Yeah,
other
yeah.
night when we drove by, and they're making these big monsters for that
Right,
parade.
the go-go's,
and there was
yeah.
not one adult in that
Right.
whole room, and they're creating.
And they're creating.
They're
creating their vision.
Creating not something small.
No, not
They're
at all.
creating something I
Huge.
could never create.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even know how. I mean, I literally was blown away.
And their visions of these demons, these monsters that they make, they're a combination of traditional Hindu Bali, demons, but also it's like an evil Batman. It's like they're absorbed into the modern world, and so these creatures they draw from pop culture and baseball
Anime
figures,
and all kinds of
everywhere,
stuff. Yep,
and yet still incorporate this Hindu thing that becomes this monster, which in many ways is insulting to their own culture, and yet it's now been elevated
it's
to this.
absorbed into
Oh,
it too.
it's
okay,
been so
so
absorbed. It's so
we were
wonderful.
sitting in a group, and these two little boys
Yeah.
had their iPhones, and they were into it, and I was
Right.
like, I gotta know, what are they
What are
doing?
they looking at? Yeah.
And I looked over, and they were looking at these pictures,
Uh-huh.
and I know what they were doing.
Of the go-go's.
No,
Oh.
of like anime and
Oh, okay.
and
Oh,
cartoons.
awesome,
And
awesome.
they were flipping.
Stealing ideas. Good
Yes.
for them.
And I was like, oh, I bet I know what they're doing.
Sure.
And I asked my host, and he said, yeah. He goes, they do this
Yeah.
all the time. This is what they do. Like on their off time, they watch these things. And I said,
Mm-hmm.
so in their mind, they're creating as we're right now. This little human
Right.
is creating something.
Yeah, I know. It's unbelievable. And what we're talking about is on the Balinese New Year, which is called Nyepi. It's a day of silence. And the night before, the months before, the kids create these paper mache creatures, basically demons. And then the night before Nyepi, they parade them through town and traditionally set them on fire. They don't set them on fire anymore because everybody loves them so much. They want to preserve them.
Well, they have one in their temple.
Yeah.
They kept it.
And I don't know if you noticed, that ugly monkey head at my house.
Yeah.
That was from an ago that we found when we were up
funny.
north, and they were tearing it apart so they could use the framework
Use the
to build a
framework,
new
yeah,
work.
yeah.
And we said, can we buy that monkey head for you? And of course they looked at us like, we were going to put it in the garbage, Sure, you can buy it, But I was like, here's money.
I was going to ask you where that came from, because
Yeah.
that was wacky. I was
Yeah.
like, wow.
There were, I think, 2 or 3 of them. ZB has one, I have one. It was a Medusa monkey-headed creature. So it was like, it had like 12 evil monkey heads in this Medusa arrangement. And they were just going to throw it away. And so we helped them pay for the, stuff they needed to build the new one by buying it from
But
them.
the story, keep going, because the story
So-
of how it started
Oh
is
yeah,
so
the
cool.
go-go. So the way it started was, I think it was in the 80s, and it's a fairly new, it's not a historical Balinese tradition, but the kids, like all kids, a day of silence. Oh man, no. I mean, do we have to? Yes, you have to. No. So the night before, they started getting together, making these monsters and creatures to piss off their parents, basically. To piss off. It's like,
We'll
like that
show
ritual.
you.
And it
And
developed.
we're going to march them down the street.
And we're going to march them down the street. and it's become a competition from one village to the next. And now it's a Balinese institution to have these ago-agos. And I mean, I've done some videos on the past on them, but I think it's one of the most amazing things. And it's also, for you and me particularly, I think it's like to see that creativity and art is so alive and still having a huge influence. And it's like the Kachak dance that you saw. That doesn't go back hundreds of years. That's like 100 years old, and it was started by a German anthropologist artist who was here working with local dance people to create this new kind of performance thing. And so the ago-ago is the same way, and I love that these traditions are alive and still changing. And I think that's what keeps
They're
the Balinese still
allowed to be alive.
and I think that's what
change.
keeps the young Balinese still engaged with their own culture and their Hindu tradition.
Yeah.
Is the fact that it is so alive.
Well, I actually had a really deep conversation with my host and a couple other people about this, because I said, you're at the edge. You're at the edge.
Yeah.
I feel it.
Yeah.
Do you feel it? Like there's and this is part of foresight. It's like, well, what do you see in the horizon? What do you see coming? And at first, they're not seeing
Right.
what's coming. They're
Right.
seeing what is already here. Like, well, these people come in and they build, and I'm like, yeah, that's not what's coming. That's not what's coming. And what I hope are what you're talking about, where they can keep these traditions alive in a way that engages all the new generations,
Right.
that they welcome them. They don't, how do I say this? They don't, not that just forget, but and not even reject, but just it's not useful anymore, because that's the part that is sad, because it is useful.
Yeah. And I think it translates into the world of music, because I know that when I was in college in the 70s and studying ethnomusicology and world music and folklore, there were people like Alan Lomax, who's featured in the new Bob Dylan biopic, who collected. They were not musicians. They were academics or people who were interested, who collected the music to be preserved in the National Archives, and started the Newport Folk Festival, and had very strict ideas of what constituted folk music. And he wasn't a musician.
Yeah.
And then the same thing happened as I saw ethnomusicologists going out and recording, stone guys beating on stones in Ghana making music, that we got to preserve this, we can't let it change, And then a musician goes there, from California or wherever, and suddenly there's an idea exchange, and you find out those musicians are just like these musicians. They want to invent new sounds, new styles. They want to learn,
combine, fuse.
And people see that. Some people see this as a diffusion and a weakening, and I'm like, no, it's a new creation coming out, and I find it so well expressed here. I mean, I may be egotistical about this, but as you know, I have some gamelan instruments at my house, and the local temple practices every night. And I swear to God, one night they were playing and they paused, and I tried to repeat what they had just been, the phrase they had been playing. So I know they can hear me. And then they did it again and stopped, and I did it again and stopped, until I was able to play what they were playing. And I thought, this is crazy.
It's a conversation.
It's a conversation in a jungle, through.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I love, you see that so much here. You see it. It's what makes, for me, living here constantly exciting, never boring.
I think that is, and again, we can explore this more, but again, bringing it back to that, what you just said, it's not just what they're doing. They know why they're doing it.
Yes.
They're just not repeating back these traditions.
Not at all.
Because I can tell you, the younger people that I've been talking to can tell me why they do each one. Why the pieces, why it's important to put these pieces in the offering. We do this for this and this, because I helped Kadak, you know.
Yeah,
and
that's so great that you made those.
I just wanted to know how do you do this and why, and then and the reasons why. Oh, but we use this plant, and it's at the north part, and the reason for that is, and they just go through the whole thing, and I just was like, wow. So, you know, how do you pass that on? It's not just repetitive, rote. Do this because I said so. They understand why.
So a lot of kids learn gamelan from sitting in their parents' lap
I saw it.
with their hands on their dad's as he's playing it, and it's literally being transmitted into the body of the child. And it's like, I mean, part of me is like, well, damn, I'm never going to learn to play. You know?
Well,
but at the same time, you know, I'm working at it.
When we talk more, I
yeah.
can tell you that those gamelan bands, which I can't remember the name of them, they would have, it's shaped like, here's one, here's one, here's
Right.
one. And they had the men on the outside, and there were two little boys on the inside.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand why till you just said that.
Right.
And that's why.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, the boys aren't playing, and they're absorbing all of this.
Right.
Like, what is that too loud? I mean, they're playing it loud.
Right.
But that's what they were doing.
Yeah.
And that, oh my gosh, that gives me the chills.
And usually, if there's an orchestra with kids in it, the kids are given the big gong, which I think is so cool. They're given the big gong to play because you only hit one note every now and then, but it's like, I get the big gong. You know, that's so cool. Because I know, you know, the first time I was here, I bought a big gong to take back to America. And sure enough, when I was buying my little small orchestra, ZB bought a big gong to have in this place. And
The gong's cool.
Oh, you gotta have a big gong.
And it does sound cool.
It totally sounds cool.
It's really
And when you
cool.
see them marching down the street during a parade, it's a lot more chaotic. It feels a lot more improvisational. Like it's just like, let's clank it and make. And this is what I love about the Balinese. The Javanese gamelan is more sedate, and meditative, and beautiful and ethereal. And Balinese gamelan is fucking Metallica compared to that. You know, it's loud and obnoxious.
Heavy metal,
and
and
it's
it's
heavy
in a
metal
serious way.
in a serious way, and I love it for that. It's like, wake up, everybody, wake up, we're coming through. And
Oh, that's lovely. That's lovely.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's that curiosity that invites those young boys in, like, come on, you know, like and like I'm telling you, these little children
kids, little
were
kids.
up there during the ceremony. They were all playing on the stage at
Yeah.
the temple, and they were wandering in and out. And I'm thinking, that would never happen in America.
Yeah.
They would have been like, get off the stage, you know, come over here, sit down, be good, you know,
And yet, think about it, if like, you know, the New York Symphony had, if the clarinet player had his child sitting in his lap while he was playing,
Yeah.
you know, what would that, I mean, because, you know, as we know, music education in America doesn't even exist anymore. And it's like, that's music education right there.
Well, it's music as life, right?
Yes.
Because that's what we've kind of forgotten a
Right.
little bit, you know.
Right.
Like, I mean, seriously, everybody I knew as a child, everybody
Played
something.
Everybody played something.
And
yeah.
now it's so
Everybody
rare.
plays the phone.
Yeah, they play the phone.
Yeah, plays their phone.
Yeah, so
I've got Spotify.
I know. Yeah, I'll share my playlist with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that is I'm struggling with how to bring that back with me. Because I said
Sure.
I said this to my husband a couple of days ago. I said, you know, the saddest thing is what I know.
Yeah.
I know that this will fade.
Yeah.
I'll go back and this will fade.
Yeah.
And I'll remember, but I won't remember. And I said, how do I keep this understanding? It's not a knowledge or a learning.
Well,
it's
you've been
something-
doing a photojournalistic essay. That's going to help.
I
And
hope.
certainly if you're recording anything, or I don't know if you keep a written journal,
Yeah.
but I know that, you know, from that first trip I had 35 years ago. I still read that thing. It looks very naive to me now, of course. But at the same time, I'm like, the wonder and excitement was there then, and it's the same wonder and excitement that I have now. So what do you want to take back to the States? What do you see that you can take back that's Balinese?
Very, very much the simplicity, the elegant simplicity. Because I think one of the things that I felt when I came here, it's so funny because when my husband Chick met me at the airport, he was like, I got to get you de-Westernized, man. Like you brought it all with you. I was heavy. I had a complex set of luggage, not just physical, but mental, emotional luggage. And slowly over these weeks, and now, God, I can't even believe it's almost 2 months of being here.
I know.
I don't have it anymore, and I've allowed myself to let stuff go. And so I think the one thing I want, and I absolutely will, is I want to bring back a simplicity. But the sacredness of the everyday moments in that simplicity is just so cool. It's not a ceremony. Like I think about, I going to a Japanese tea ceremony is very beautiful, and you do certain things and all that. Okay, and you can have tea this way, but this is more like in every little thing. There's this simple acknowledgement of creating the sacred space to be alive in that moment. And that right there, I want to bring back with me. But also, just like I said, that curiosity, getting outside of myself has been a huge blessing. And I said this before, and I think the other thing was allowing myself to be completely melted away. Yeah. I got here, and I have never been wetter in my life. Never have I been wetter. I have never cried as much as I have cried since I have been here. Yeah. I have had the worst cold that I have ever had, and more congestion and cleaning out of all that stuff, and the sheer amount of just it's just a complete wetness that I've given into. It's just like I mean, seriously, I was sitting in a coffee shop a couple of days ago, and these people had just arrived, and they were from North Carolina. Lovely couple, and they were talking about it, and she says, it's the humidity, I just can't bear it. I said, I brought my makeup. Yeah. And I brought stuff for my hair. Yeah. And I haven't used much of it at all because why? Like, why bother?
The humidity is good for your skin.
Well, not only that, but I haven't put any moisturizer on because
you don't need
why?
it. Yeah.
And I said, I want to invite you, and said this to this woman. I swear to God, she thought it was a complete nut, and because makeup. Sure. And I go, I would like to invite you. Give it up. Yeah. Give all that up and dig in to the wet Bali, because I tell you what. If you see that from a different perspective, you will be cleansed. Yeah. Inside and out cleansed. Right. I've never been wetter in my life.
I know.
But
I love that.
It's okay. And how many times have we been caught in the rain?
Oh, for sure. I mean, besides actual wetness,
I know.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, how many times have we been caught in the rain? And at some point, I remember one night, after we went out to the movie and I went shopping, and I was wandering around in the downtown Bali, and I was just like, and at that point, puddles and it wasn't stopping. No, I tried. I was like, well, maybe if I stop over here. Yeah, it wasn't stopping. Yeah. And I just went, you know what? I'm just gonna be wet. I'm gonna be so wet. And then I went, how wet can I get? I'm gonna go walk through all the puddles. I just was like, I'm just gonna be wet. I'm gonna be so wet. So I think that's what I want to bring back is, again, I think Bali is teaching me to be. Just be with it. Because when I fight against it, when you push against that
Yeah.
box that you're in, when
Yeah.
we go back into thinking land and
Right.
outside
I
a
love
box,
that, yeah.
there's still the box.
Right.
Now you're outside of it. But what
Yeah.
if there was no box?
Right.
Right? So what if there was no box?
Yeah.
And you were just in some space and there wasn't a box, because even seeing that there was a box
Mm-hmm.
over there, there's still a box. You're still acknowledging that there's one.
I think also it's we're so exposed. The wetness is like we're so exposed and affected by nature. And I know that we're both from Tamales, and we'd talk about beautiful sunsets and being part of nature, but not like you are here. I mean, you're living in a place with open architecture. I have open architecture.
I mean,
it's
this
like,
is our living room, right?
This is our living room, and it's like, that's one of the wonderful things. When I first was here, I went back and thought, oh my God, I want to have a house for like one room. Literally, it's just a roof with no walls, I want to be exposed to the real world, the real natural world. And one of my great joys here is just when I'm depressed or even thinking things aren't going my way, is to just get on my motorcycle and just take off through the rice fields. And it's
And
like,
even that in and of itself is just sitting in water.
it's just sitting
all the time.
Exactly.
Constant
Yeah.
water. I'm telling
Yeah.
you that will be, and if I, you were talking about writing, I think probably the first thing I'll write about is the water, because
Yeah.
of how you talk about getting clean water.
Yeah.
It's falling from the sky.
Yeah.
Or having drinking water. Yeah, and how important that is, right?
Yeah.
And how there's just so many aspects to this, and so I think that's what I'm going to take with me is a new way of looking at living.
Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Deborah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been wonderful.
Yes, thank you. Yes.
Highway to Mars.